Hi there, hope you have a fantastic day today. This lesson I will teach you how to find and sketch the inverse functions. Of course, there's a PDF file versions on the description below for you to download so you can work with me. Otherwise, let's go straight into it. First one. Now, to find the inverse functions, so we need to do two things. Okay, the first one is we need to interchange between x and the y variable. And then we make y as a subject. That will give us the inverse functions. So the first one is we have f of x is equal to x to the power 3 plus 1. Let me just write this down first. So f of x is equal to x to the power 3 plus 1. So we need to interchange between x and y. So f of x is just like y, okay? So now we just interchange the value. So x is equal to, now this is switch around, so that become y power 3 plus 1. So now we need to make y as a subject, okay? So to do this, I move this positive 1 on this side, so that becomes minus. So the answer is x minus 1 is equal to y to the power of 3. Now to make y as a subject, so we just cube root of both sides, okay? Because opposite of power 3 is cube root. So that is x minus 1. So we just cube root of this. So that will give me y. So that will give me the inverse functions. So therefore, f inverse of x is equal to x minus 1 and cube root. So there you go. This is the inverse functions of x power 3 plus 1. Part B. Now to sketch a graph. So let me just draw the axis first. So let me just label. So this is y, this is x. Now the inverse functions is the reflections of the functions about the line y equal x. Okay, so let me just draw y is equal to x first. So this here. So this is here y is equal to x. Let's get the function first. So we know the function is f of x is equal to x to the power 3 plus 1. So we know that x to the power 3 is like this. But then we need to plus 1, so move 1 unit up, okay? So this 1 unit up, so the graph is just like this. And the y-intercept is 1 and the x-intercept is negative 1. Now to sketch the inverse functions. So remember, which is the reflecting about the line y equal x. So at this point here, 0, 1, it becomes 1, 0. So 1, 0 is here. And then at this point here, negative 1, 0 becomes 0, negative 1. So 0, negative 1 here. At this point here, the functions and its inverse always equal. Because the inverse functions is the reflecting of the functions about line y equal x. That's why. So now we just sketch it. Now to sketch this, so remember, if you can see this, because the function is curved to the y-axis, so the inverse should curve to the x-axis, if you like. So I just sketch it. There you go. So this is just a rough sketch. So this is inverse of x. And this is f of x. So there you go. So part C. So we need to write down the domain and the range of the inverse functions. So you can see the domain for the inverse is this one here. So you can see there is no restrictions. So it's actually can go from negative infinity all the way to positive infinity for the x values, because domain is the restrictions of the x values. So let me write that down. Domain of inverse is from negative infinity all the way to positive infinity, or just write infinity, and is exclusive. So there you go. Otherwise, you can look at the range of the functions. Will also give you the domain of the inverse. You can look at the range here. So the y value for the functions can go from negative infinity all the way to positive infinity. So that is the range for the function. So it is also the domain of the inverse functions. So keep that in mind. Now to write down the range of the inverse. So let me just write this down. The range of the inverse is the domain of the function, if you like. But the range is, you can see there's no restriction for y value. So the y function here, if you look at it, the graph is actually extended. It keeps going up, okay? So, and also this one here, it just keep going down. So therefore, the range of the inverse functions is no restrictions. So therefore, from negative infinity to positive infinity. There you go. Please pause the video and try this one yourself. Hi, I'm back. How do you go? So let me go through it with you, okay? Before I do that, please do not forget to give me a thumb up and subscribe if you haven't done so you can help me to grow my channel. So let's get into it. So to find the inverse functions, step number 1, we need to interchange between the x variable and the y variable. And then we make y as a subject, okay? So let me write down the function first. So f of x is equal to x minus 1 all power 3. So now, which is interchange. So we make this is x, and fx is just like y. So we interchange between y and x is equal to y, because this x becomes y now, minus 1 power 3. So now we just solve for y. So to solve this, opposite power 3 is cube root. So I cube root both sides. So that give me cube root of x is equal to y minus 1. So now I move the minus 1 on that side. So it becomes plus 1. So cube root of x plus 1 is equal to y. So therefore, this is the inverse of the functions. So therefore, f inverse of x is equal to cube root of x plus 1. So there you go. Now we need to sketch the functions and the inverse. So this is y, this x. So now let's sketch the function first. So we know the function is f of x is equal to x minus 1 power 3. And the inverse is f inverse of x is equal to cube root of x plus 1. So let's sketch the function first. So we know that x to the power 3 is like this. But then inside the bracket minus 1, it moves horizontally 1 unit to the right. So therefore, the point inflection is here now. And to find y-intercept, which is replace x becomes 0. So 0 minus 1 is negative 1. Power 3 is still negative 1. So this graph here. So we just sketch it. So just a rough one, okay? Now we sketch the inverse. But before I do that, let me just sketch the y equal x first, okay? The line, very important, because the inverse functions is the functions that reflecting about the y equal x, okay? So remember that for me. So now to sketch the inverse, so let me just write this down. Y equal x first, and this is f of x. To sketch the inverse, we just look at the functions and then we just reflecting. Much easier, okay? So you can see this point here, 1, 0 becomes 0, 1. And 0, negative 1, so becomes -1, 0. And at this point here, they're always the same. Just remember that, okay? So now if you look at the function, it curved to the y-axis. So now the inverse, it curved to the x-axis. That's how you two identify it, okay? So I can just quickly sketch this. So this is f inverse of x. So there you go. Now we need to write down the range and the domain of the inverse functions. So you can see there is no restrictions for the domains for the inverse functions, and there is no restrictions for the range for the inverse function as well. So no restriction for both. So I just write this down for the domain of the inverse functions. So there is no restrictions. So that means from -infinity to infinity. And the range for the inverse is also no restrictions. So there you go. I hope you got all of them correct. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.